Hi, welcome back. Luka, how are you doing?
Very good. Very excited to be here, Al.
Well,
Finally.
I'm excited to have you because you're making some noise and really positive noise in the people analytics space, and you're making it accessible for organizations of all sizes. So, before launching into my narrative or how I see you, if you would please introduce yourself and a little bit about Orgnostic.
Yeah, so I have a very interesting, I would say, HR pathway that I took right after college. I was doing the IO psych research back in the day, and I had a pleasure and the privilege to work with Richard Hackman, one of the greats of social psychology and organizational psychology back at Harvard. And I think he at that time subconsciously kind of directed my path and career, because after being exposed to kind of biopsych, my natural pathway forward was to go towards anything that was organizational. But I had this passion for startups, for tech companies. That's when I joined a company at that time, a startup that in the 6 year period that I spent there, grew into this unicorn. Right? And naturally, coming from this IO psych background, I was trying to fill in the gaps that we had on the operations, people side, and HR. And that's how essentially my career in HR took off. And it was a very interesting experience, just because when you're growing a tech company, when you're growing an HR team there and people operations, you're constantly trying to figure out what's going on in the company in this high growth environment. And my natural kind of fallback was numbers at the time. And I'm hard to do anything with numbers at the time, when it was a company of 200, 300, 500 employees, as we continued growing. So that was a kind of first-hand problem with setting up people analytics infrastructure that I experienced, right? And this is where the little light bulb kind of started to grow. We started building a people analytics team. We decided to build our own internal solution. It took us incredibly long time. It was a very expensive process. And I started talking to other peers in HR and CHROs and chief people officers in these companies that are like 200, 500, 600 employees, and they had a pretty similar set of struggles when it comes to just accessing the numbers. And this is how the idea about Orgnostic started. Let's try to figure out what are the barrier to entry. Why is it so damn hard for small organizations to actually start utilizing numbers? And that's how the whole idea and how Orgnostic began. 2019 as my idea, and then in 2020. My co-founder Igor and I basically created the company around that, which was a very interesting time to start a company. Now looking in retrospect, right? So that's in a nutshell, how Agnostic started. I'm more than happy to kind of jump into specifics of it.
Well, I mean, there's so much, and we're in our time here. And by the way, thanks for joining us. If you have questions, enter them into the comments, and we'll get to as many as we can in our time together today. What I do want to highlight is a few things to set the stage for our discussion, because we are going to talk about Orgnostic. We're going to talk about how the value can be realized in organizations, again, of all sizes. And the thing is, it's very clear that the need and value to aggregate, analyze, distribute data and insight in an organization is high value. I mean, that has been proven time and again. However, the idea that smaller organizations in particular can actually make that happen in a sustainable way has been elusive. It's like, I just don't have the resources, I don't have the time, I don't know where to start, all these things. And if somebody else says, oh gosh, we're not there yet, I'm going to go, I am personally, I'm just going to go nuts. But you are saying, hey, time out. We can actually make that happen. We can make it accessible. We can, demystify it. So, if you would, can you talk about how you position your value proposition in small to mid-sized companies, specifically with maybe a
Yeah.
solo practitioner, or maybe, no people analytics leader?
Yeah. Yeah. So when you think about the landscape since 2019, 2020, it has changed drastically from the perspective of HR budgets and just the digitalization levels across the board, right? So what happened right now is the organization. I'm already seeing organizations with 50 employees that are using HRIS, ATS system. Some of them already kind of jumping into performance management systems and similar. And people are kind of discounting the value of companies starting to use technology much earlier, because what it does, it helps standardize the data. It helps standardize the processes, the flows, etc. Right? And this is a drastic change that happened. When Vizier, when they started back in the day, 2010, you only had these that had big ERP systems, Workdays, SAPs of the world, and they had real problems just because they had a lot of data that was unstructured and needed to solve that. But what happened in the meantime is that you had companies much earlier starting to gain these structured data pockets that at least now we didn't have a bunch of Excels and bunch of ideas and notions that you have, but that is not really overly useful, right? And I think that kind of landscape created a positive context for us to actually start thinking about this and start working very hard on solving particularly 3 barriers to entry that we saw here. One barrier to entry that is huge in this space is technological. And the technological barrier to entry so far has been related to how quickly you can connect the data from multiple sources and get the results back. And this is something that was quite tied to the second barrier to entry, which was financial, right? And that's because you need people to actually work on this problem and connect the data manually and map it and create this model. What as a result of that happened is that you had increased price in how much this kind of solution would cost you, that you just wouldn't have the budget for when you're a very company, right? And the third one is what you mentioned as well, and that's the educational component. And when you think about the companies right now, even if you're a 100-employee company, you already have certain turnover that is happening, which is like 10 to 20, some of them 30%, right? Which is, again, increasing the volume of changes in the company that is generating more data. If you're a Series B company of 100 employees, you're going to have plans to double in size. That means that you're going to probably have, for 100 employees, 2,000 candidates, meaning that there is already a pretty solid amount of data that you can deal with in order to get insights and structure the processes. So the questions are definitely there for smaller organizations. Now we needed to solve for this technical, financial, or this ability to create it as affordable as possible for organizations when they're smaller, and to create an educational component on what are the insights that you should focus on and similar, right? So what we went for is we try to tackle all 3. My co-founder Igor is an amazing person altogether that I hope you'll have a chance to meet and more, and have also an opportunity to discuss a little bit more with. But he was dealing previously with a similar set of problems in biotech industry, right? And they have normalization of and that's how do you create a model that doesn't involve necessarily people to connect the data from multiple dispersed sources and similar. And we started talking about how similar that kind of problem is to the HR technology, and you don't have so many deep tech companies in HR. So what we tackled first was, hey, how do we create this as cheap as possible for organizations to have multiple systems integrated and to create out-of-the-box visualization so that you can do it in a day, not in a matter of weeks or in just a couple of hours by clicking the API keys and copy pasting them and similar, right? So that was the kind of approach that we wanted to promote, that we focused on primarily. That's reducing the technology barrier with the goal of reducing the financial barrier, and removing the data engineering, data science side from the connection, and then going into educating market as well and helping them with understanding the use cases, much so they can go in front of management and be confident in the stories that they're telling. Oh.
As you're sharing this, I'm getting very excited about the idea that value for people analytics is going to be realized by more. And we've been after that. And I love the way you broke it down. Particularly, I want to highlight the educational component because many HR leaders, people ops leaders, HR technologists have not grown up with people analytics. So they don't know the potential. They do not know the barriers. And I say that compassionately. I don't say that critically. So what you're doing is bringing a solution technologically that is affordable with an educational component that can help them not only structure the data and reports and dashboards and all that, but how to actually drive adoption with an organization. So can you talk about how you do aggregate all the data and make it easy and quick? You said a day, copying API keys and making it happen in a very seamless way. Can you speak to more details about that? And I know you have some slides to this.
Yes, for sure. I mean, when you think about the whole process of normalizing that data, what we started with was the idea of how do we create a certain meta model, right? The model where you can focus on the mid-market tools, because mid-market tools, as opposed to enterprise tools like Workday and SAP, have already very strict set of structures and the processes that are linked in. So we focused on HRSs and ATS systems primarily, and then we started building on top of that performance management systems and similar, until we went into spreadsheets and until we actually started diving into enterprise software as well. But the idea was, how do we use already certain set of fixed structures, and how do we map them onto a specific system that can create a consistent output, no matter whether you're using Lever or Teamtailor or Greenhouse or Workable or Recruity as an ATS solution, right? So we really focused on kind of figuring out the data structures in all of these different set of tools and what they can normally create as a set of outputs back. So that was the majority of the efforts that we had, from the very beginning, into how do we actually use our manual work and our engineering time onto manually onboarding someone and doing that kind of mapping process ourselves. And then the next part was also, we were seeing a lot of providers talking about integrating the surveys data on top of that. And I think that survey and experience data is extremely important for especially smaller organizations, not to talk about the big ones. But let's say that right now you're using some of the third-party vendors to manage surveys. There is usually that anonymity premise that is preventing you from actually ingesting that data. So even if you're ingesting it, it's pre-processed. It's not very insightful from the perspective of linking it with rewards information, with performance information, with any kind of segment that you want to create. So what we went about was, creating a serving layer that sits on top, so that from one system you can control how do you collect experience data, how do you collect the exit information onboarding, with the idea of actually enriching the experience and giving more data within the context. And the context for us was this, and that was, how do you create this? How do you support the full employee life cycle, right? And thinking as a relatively small company, what we wanted to basically give as an opportunity to our customers and to future customers is to figure out on these critical life cycle moments or elements, what are the key metrics that they should capture, and what are the kind of North Stars that they can figure out, and how do we actually allow them, even if they don't have the data, to create that kind of metric? How do we allow them from the system to collect data for time to productivity, quality of hire, and similar metrics that are not necessarily going to be available from the HRS or ATS system? So that was the big vision. That's what we actually did on the technology side first as a solution, right?
A lot comes out, and by the way, just a sidebar, I love that you said time to productivity, because that's something that I think is overlooked. If you can shrink time to productivity, the cost of turnover goes down, and just understanding what that looks like, it takes creative measures. I also want to call out that you talk about doing the analytics, and that actually provides visibility in the data that is valuable, that's usable, and identifies gaps to where you can go and fill those gaps with surveys or other data collection processes. So in other words, do it early, as opposed to making all these system decisions downstream, and then you have to unbundle and rework a lot of the things that
For
were
sure.
done.
Yeah.
Can you speak to that real quick?
Yeah, it's exactly. So that's the whole data health component, right? All the garbage in, garbage out idiom, but the whole idea behind it is, if you start early enough, and if you start about these critical elements, critical moments in your employee journey that you need to capture, is going to create lot less data debt that be impossible for you to cover once you hit 1,000 employees, 2,000, 5,000 employees, and similar, right? So what you're fighting against is pretty much, when you start early, you're adding this strategic layer to your thinking that down the road, once you scale, this is going to be an extremely expensive endeavor for you, right? So if you start collecting the data early, if you start structuring it early, you're going to prevent the organizational and data that would happen at a certain point of time, just because of the neglect or this kind of information about time to productivity. When you multiply it by 1,000 employees or 5,000 employees, the impact on the bottom line is just going to be extremely different than when you're a 100-employee company. But it's going to be also on the end level more expensive and time consuming for you to create, or even impossible to recreate the data historically, so that you learn something from it, right?
Gosh, I mean, that data debt is probably forever going to live in my head, because it's a hugely powerful construct. So, thank you for that. Let me ask this question, because you touched on it when you spoke to the slide. So I'm a small organization. I have a retention challenge, or I am concerned about well-being with hybrid work or productivity or any of these, dynamics.
Mm-hmm.
I might be thinking, well, I'm just going to do a survey. I'll do some focus groups. However, there's all this passive data that is existing. There's also the core HR system data. There's the ATS data. There's learning data. There's all this data that can be harnessed to shed insight on not only what's going on, but what are the interventions that will actually help. So,
Mm-hmm.
with the idea of beginning with the end in mind, if there's not a technology that can actually harness all that data, there's going to be significant gaps. Can you speak to Orgnostic's ability, and specifically, if I am a people ops leader, HR tech leader, what is my first step? What's the initial conversation that you have with HR technologists and people analytics leaders to have them see the light on the value of aggregating data across the employee lifecycle?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I think this was also a learning path for us as we built the product, and as we were speaking to more and more people that are within this space. And our initial hypothesis was that CHRO of a small company is just going to be the main consumer of this kind of data. A company that is like 200, 300, 500 employees, the CHROs are going to be extremely interested in this, and I think this is true to a certain point. When there's a very strong cultural push for it. If C-level requests data, if C-level is hungry, or if the person who is coming to that position is already coming with some people ops background. I think this is a place that is, or this is a specific position that is changing and evolving quite a lot. And they're the kind of people that that are starting to consume this data for board meetings, for introducing the concepts in how do we fix the recruitment process, because this is extremely important for us right now where we are growing, or what are the gaps that we have on the exit side. And those are the usual kind of scenarios where we see CHROs actually diving into data, and that's exits, that's onboarding, and in most of the cases, kind of prevention of burnout risk, and similar things that they can notice in the patterns of absenteeism in the company, sick leaves usage, and similar points, right? But what we've seen also is when the company reaches 300, 400, 500, the people ops function that becomes very specific. There's a very specific mandate for people ops function to create HR dashboards. Now, I have my opinion about dashboards in HR. I don't think it's like dashboards per se are particularly useful, because management is not used in reading that data. So if you send them dashboard, they're just going to ignore it altogether. So you need to provide context, and we're kind of pushing for people ops to create reports that have certain context around it, so they can interpret the data. And thinking about HR data, it's not like that you have financial logs that are changing on every other seconds, and that you're sitting in Wall Street and kind of looking into dashboard that is constantly being updated. It's a relatively slow data. It's on a daily basis updated, but on weekly and monthly basis, you can see the differences. So you need to look into the patterns, into the strategy, right? And where we see now people ops kind of adapting this mentality of actually going in and interpreting data and trying to be that support, that's secret sauce for the CHRO to be the strategic leader. And then out of the blue, we had this completely new population that we didn't think that we were going to serve, but that's solo people analytics practitioners in these like big enterprises that are not coming with strong data science background, like companies that have 30 PhDs in people analytics team, but that have one person who's dedicated into creating the data-driven HR, right? And they need loads of support into doing as from the technology side, from education side, from managing their peaks and similar. So they need like a simpler solution that can fast give them something that is some sort of results and some sort of insights. And these are the kind of audiences that we then started catering to as well, because they had a very similar problem to the people ops in a smaller group and a CHRO in a smaller in an even smaller company, right? So those are the kind of scenarios that we started playing with, and that we really enjoy right now solving for.
One of the things that I'm really enjoying about, and it's kind of it's not necessarily an epiphany, but it is something that I think is a healthy construct for listeners to get their heads around. If you're a mid-sized organization, a growing organization, if you're a people ops leader, your main job, make sure people get paid, make sure the systems that are running critical processes function properly. Meanwhile, all these systems are generating data. And to your point, hey, we want a dashboard so we understand what's happening. And there's this implication that, oh, that's just magic. You just, plug it in and, it'll work.
Yeah.
That's not necessarily the case unless you have a tool that's built to actually do that. And that's where, Orgnostic comes in. So what I want to call out is that, people analytics leaders, and, when I was back at Gap, we rebranded our function Employee Insights. So it spoke to the value that we're delivering as opposed to the process by which we're delivering that value. So where I'm getting at is like people analytics is almost like a chief information officer for the workforce, for HR, to understand, what is happening, what will likely happen in the future, what are the appropriate interventions to take place. So that is different than staging or standing up certain technologies, improving certain processes. So what I'm hearing is that there's a healthy distinction to be made and a recognition that the work is different and the technology by which to provide insights into the workforce is in fact different. And so I think that's an important, call out. So one thing that I really want to highlight in the balance of our time, and I know we're coming up, and I'm going to put up something that Dunya has commented on. you mentioned API keys and getting this done in a day. Can you speak more to how that actually works? So I write a check to Orgnostic today. What happens?
Oh, so
What's the next?
Orgnostic is the only freemium platform on the market. What that means is that we're like a true software as a service solution. So you can come to the platform, you can walk through our process where you can see, hey, there's a set of tools that we have already connected out of the box where you can go click connect. Is going to give you the instructions where you can find or generate API key. You copy, paste it, and you start. And you can start with your own data. You can start with dummy data and play with just like the kind of insights that you can potentially get from platform, right? So it allows you to see how it works on imaginary data set and how it can work potentially on your set. So you have 2 weeks to go and play with your data before making any sort of decision to kind of move forward and decide on any kind of plan that you want to use on the platform. But the idea is that when we were speaking about people ops, right, and when you mentioned this connectivity problem, like alternative to them is going there and pulling the data into different Excel sheets and then pushing them into Power BI or creating like a master sheet, which is usually not, when you download Bamboo HR data or Personia data, it's not going to be one perfect Excel sheet. It's going to be a bunch of different sheets that you need to cross-reference, create like unique identifiers and similar, not to mention ATS data and performance management and similar. So it's saving you months of work, and it's literally a couple of clicks of button that you can walk through on our website. And there's always our customer success and our team that is kind of jumping in to help if there's any technical support that is needed. But that is something that is that we try to make as simple as possible, right? So it's come in, find the API key, click, and play with the data. Try to visualize it. See what's the data held. We have a free plan as well, and the free plan allows you to see where are your data gaps. So if you see that like only 70% of your data can generate certain metrics, and you need to go in and fix it, you don't want to go and start with the paying plan. You want to stay on the free one until you're ready to see the value from those, and you can check that in like a limited history that you can see, and then transfer into one of the paid plans. So, that was the kind of process that we wanted to support, that kind of revolution in the way that you're able to visualize the end results right away, not wait, kind of sign a contract that you mentioned, right, before being able to see the value.
As you're sharing this, and when we first started talking, I was like dumbfounded about where we are in history, because the idea of me doing this 20 years ago was frankly beyond imagination. It's like when I was at a Fortune 500 company, we were refreshing data once a quarter, sending it to a third party, and it would take 21 calendar days to refresh that data. And who wanted to see that at that point? No one. So what I'm hearing from you is that you can plug and play and you see value the same day, which is, again, just this side of miraculous. And again, I want to call out that there's work that needs to be done both on the back end and from the consumer side. It's not magic. Things just don't find themselves when you're aggregating data.
There are always data gaps and like some uncleanliness that needs to be fixed, but at least you have the ability to see, what are the parts of the platform that you are misusing. For example, you might be generating so many new different stages in your recruitment process right now that are kind of not allowing you to see how the candidates are flowing or similar, right? But that's a very important knowledge for someone who is leading the processes in the company and operations, right?
Right. Well, hey, again, we're going to have to talk more. And I know we're going to do a podcast shortly about your personal story and how Orgnostic came to be. And you've touched on it at the outset. But in the meantime, I know you're going to be at HR Tech here in a couple of weeks. But how can people learn more about you and Orgnostic?
Well, obviously, we are very active on LinkedIn. Coming from the HR background, I think like every HR person is on LinkedIn, so that's where we are at. Orgnostic.com is a place where you can learn quite a lot. We generate a lot of content as well on our blog, and I think it's blog and the newsletter are very useful for anyone who is interested in the people analytics topics. We also have under the resources tab up there that you're showing also the access to the people analytics launch, which is basically our little movement in the community where you can jump in and either go and follow through our master classes. I was mentioning this whole initiatives around educating the market and being able to educate our potential users and the future users as well about the benefits of people analytics. We created this series of different events called master classes where you have amazing people like Jeff Higgins, talking about the connection between finance and HR data, Nick Bremner from Uber, Patty Smith from Cruise, that are talking about their expertise and trying to share the learnings across the way. Along the way. So this is definitely something that that could be quite useful to anyone who is interested in the people analytics topics in general.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And I'm excited to be participating in one of your forums here in a couple weeks as well. So, yeah, hey, Luka, we're going to sign off now. And if you're viewing, thank you for participating. Thank you for your questions. I see a couple that came in and that I will get to as a follow-up, and I'll put those in front of you too, Luka. But hey, congratulations again on what you've achieved. Particularly, you built this pretty much during COVID, and here you are in the back end doing great work. So again, congratulations to you and your team. And thank everyone for joining us again. And you'll be well. All right. Cheers.